Have you ever really stopped to think about what's happening behind the screen of your smartphone? You know, today we're going to connect the dots. We're going to follow this really startling story that starts with those free apps we all use and, believe it or not, ends with a global blueprint for authoritarian control. Okay, let's just dive right in. So let's kick things off with a pretty simple question. What is the actual price of all these free services we use every day? We've all heard that old saying, right? If you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. But honestly, it's way more complicated and frankly, a lot more concerning than just that. The real answer, it lies in this brand new kind of economic engine that's powering pretty much the entire modern internet. Think of it as this hidden machinery that's constantly running in the background, turning our clicks, our likes, our locations into massive profits. And it has a name: surveillance capitalism. Now, this definition, it's absolutely key, because surveillance capitalism isn't just about grabbing your data. No, it's about treating our personal experiences, your life, as a free resource, something to be mined. And for what? To predict and then ultimately to influence our future behavior. These predictions, they're the product, and they're sold to the highest bidder, not just to show you an ad, but to actually shape what you do next. Shoshana Zuboff, she's the Harvard professor who actually came up with the term, and she just nails it. Our lives, our joys, our fears, our private conversations are just claimed as free raw material. It's an extraction process, a lot like mining for oil or drilling for gas, except the resource being strip mined, well, it's us. And look, this didn't happen overnight. It kind of started small, back around 2000, with simple search ads. Then it just exploded with the rise of social media. But the real game changer? The smartphone. That's what took this data collection machine out of our web browsers and put it into every single moment of our physical lives. And now, with AI, this whole system can generate these frighteningly accurate predictions about us, which are then sold in what are called behavioral futures markets. Yeah, that's where companies literally bet on and pay for what you're going to do next. So you've got this massive, privately owned surveillance infrastructure that was built for one reason: profit. But then governments started to take notice. They saw its potential. They realized this incredibly powerful system could be repurposed for things like public safety and security. And in doing so, they started to blur a very, very critical line. And the COVID-19 pandemic, well, that was the ultimate catalyst. It was the perfect storm. Faced with a global crisis, more than 120 countries rolled out digital tracking systems. And you see, genuine public health concerns created the perfect justification for these unprecedented public-private surveillance partnerships, and it totally normalized what was, just a short time before, completely unthinkable. And this brings us to something really important: the danger of function creep. It's a simple idea. A tool is created for one specific purpose, but then it starts getting used for another, something far beyond its original goal. A perfect example is Singapore's COVID contact tracing app. The data they promised was only for health purposes, but later it was accessed by the police for criminal investigations. See, once that surveillance infrastructure is in place, the temptation to use it for more and more is almost impossible to resist. So we've gone from corporate profits to public safety. The next step in this evolution, well, it's the most extreme. This is where we see how this technology provides the ultimate toolkit for authoritarian states that are looking for total control. China right now has developed the world's most sophisticated model of digital authoritarianism. It's this whole package: total internet censorship with the Great Firewall, a social credit system that literally scores and controls people's behavior, and this massive integrated surveillance database. The region of Xinjiang, in particular, has basically become a laboratory, a testing ground for the most extreme forms of this digital control. And the human cost here is just staggering. It's estimated that up to 2 million Uyghurs have been detained, and it's based in part on predictive policing algorithms. These systems automatically flag behaviors as suspicious. We're talking about things as simple as installing a VPN or just talking to relatives who live abroad. And that flag can lead directly to detention. This is data-driven repression on an industrial scale. You know, the philosopher Michel Foucault had this concept called the panopticon. It was a design for a prison where the inmates know they could be watched at any moment, so they end up policing their own behavior. And that perfectly describes what's happening now. Digital surveillance is creating a kind of global panopticon, where this feeling of permanent visibility just leads to self-censorship and people complying before they're even asked. Now, it's really easy to think of corporate data collection in Silicon Valley as something totally separate from state surveillance in Beijing. But the truth is, they're two sides of the exact same coin. They actually feed and reinforce each other. So let's just break down how this loop works. Step 1. Tech companies build the systems to collect our data for profit. Then, governments come along and buy or just demand access to this data, often getting around legal restrictions. Step 3. They use that data for control. And finally, this state-level use makes the whole thing seem normal, which then legitimizes even more data collection by the corporations. It's a powerful, self-reinforcing cycle. Okay, so the situation is alarming, for sure, but it is not hopeless, not at all. Understanding the problem is always the first step. So let's look at what's really at stake if we do nothing, and more importantly, what we can actually do to reclaim our digital future. And let's be clear, the risks of inaction are severe. This isn't just about our privacy anymore. It's about the very real erosion of democracy through things like election manipulation and suppressing dissent. It's about these authoritarian tools spreading to more and more countries. And it's about our societies fragmenting as algorithms push all of us into our own little echo chambers, destroying any kind of shared reality. But there are clear paths forward. There are things we can do. On the legal front, we can push for strong privacy laws, like Europe's GDPR, and even ban the most high-risk technologies altogether. Technically, we can build and support tools that enhance privacy. And as citizens, we can champion digital literacy and create new community-led ways to govern our own data. So in the end, it all boils down to this one fundamental question, a question that's really going to define this century. Do we see our personal data, our actual human experiences, as just another natural resource to be mined and sold? Or do we see it as a fundamental human right that must be protected? The answer we choose is going to shape the future of freedom itself.